We'll just gather together some people on social media. We have Facebook going and Instagram. Hey people, give us 1 minute. As soon as Jessica gives me the thumbs up, we get going. Hello Instagram Live people. And we have some people on Facebook as well, that's nice. Hi, joining from Palm Desert, California. Good morning, hi, welcome. Thank you, wow, that sounds nice. Palm Desert, that sounds good, wow. Any place called Palm Desert must be beautiful, there's no doubt about that. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. Welcome everybody to our class today. I'm not my usual location. Usually I'm in New York. I'm actually in Deal, New Jersey. So I'm just in different places over here, so bear with me. I'm kind of propping up my phone over here and my iPod over there and my computer over there. But thank you all very, very much. Thanks for Jessica for allowing my schedule to be tweaked this week, last minute. Okay, so the discussion today is an important one, continuing our regular talk and discussion on becoming better at being you. And if I were to choose any trait, my dear friends, that is lifted up among others as the most perfect character trait to have and to work on, even if you don't have it, is the topic today of humility, anava or anivut in Hebrew. And this trait of humility is so misunderstood and it's such a diametrical opposite to what we're told growing up, because humility, if you just Google it, you could go to dictionary.com, which I did already this morning, and I think they'll define humility as a feeling of unworthiness. That is how the world sees this trait of humility. In Jewish we'll say, I'm nothing, I'm a shmata. This, my friends, is the exact diametrical opposite of how we're going to look at this trait today. And it's really seen as the greatest of traits that a person can have and to work on, being a humble person. So misunderstood, so unappreciated. Let's try to really define our terms in order for us to get something out of our discussion for the next 30 minutes or so. How does Judaism look at the trait of humility? I wouldn't know, I'm perfect. I'm only kidding. Let's try to figure this out and let's get some little bit of introspection and open our minds to some new ideas. Let's begin with what humility isn't. Maybe we figure out what it isn't, we may be able to figure out what exactly it is. And what it isn't is low self-esteem, that's for sure. Low self-esteem is forbidden. It is an anti-Torah, anti-Jewish trait. It's the anti-Judaism. Feeling of unworthiness, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worthy of the success of my natural abilities, or the abilities that I've worked on to make myself a great person, whatever that greatness is, whether it's in business, law, teaching, parenting, whatever that area of quality that I've worked on so hard to make myself great, what exactly am I meant to do? Yeah, I've worked on becoming a great patient or a great doctor, but I'm nothing. I mean, the last thing I want when I walk in to see a doctor is, tell me, are you the best doctor? Are you a good doctor to help me with this particular problem? He's like, me, I'm nothing. I'm so bad at what I do. Like, I don't want that in my doctor. I don't want it in my lawyer. I don't want it in my car mechanic. I want someone to really know and tell me that they are one of the best people and I'm coming to the right person at the right time with the right qualifications and the right experience. So how are we going to understand this idea of humility and self-esteem? So let's start with the mitzvah, and I use that word specifically of having good self-esteem. Where do we find the mitzvah of having good self-esteem in the Torah? And at what point does it become too much good self-esteem? Well, interestingly enough, we know one of the most famous pasukim, verses in the Torah are, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You should love others like you love yourself. Now, on the surface, that just seems like I should love other people. But we already described that that's not enough. Because loving other people is not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says you should love other people like you love yourself. Why is the like yourself at the end? Says Rashi, Rabbi Shlomi Yitzchaki, a very famous rabbi from Troy, France, over 1,000 years ago. He comments and says that if you don't love yourself, you cannot love anybody else. Sorry, Instagram, it just fell down. If you do not love yourself, you cannot love anybody else. This, says Rashi, is the mitzvah of good, healthy self-esteem. You've got to love yourself. You've got to see yourself as being good. We all make mistakes, but that's not what we're discussing. In essence, what am I? What are my skill sets? What are my God-given abilities? I'm going to see that's a major part of this. What are the abilities that God gave me? The abilities that I'm naturally good at? The abilities that I've become good at? And I'm happy with who I am? I'm happy with my station in life? And I have good self-esteem. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Because, my friends, if you don't love yourself, if you think you're garbage, then everyone else is going to look like garbage in your eyes, and you cannot love others. And therefore, the only way to really love other people is to love yourself. My friends, and I'm talking from 20 years of working in the Rabbanut, working as a rabbi, working with young people, especially high school kids that I do as well. We have in our generation, year 2020, a problem. Dare I say it, even a crisis. And that is, people are suffering from chronic and debilitating low self-esteem. Let me define those terms. Chronic means it's extreme. People think themselves as lowly creatures. They don't realize they are made in the image of God, therefore have so much to bring to the world. So it's chronic, it's extreme, but it's also debilitating. This low self-esteem is a problem. It's not just you having low self-esteem somewhere in the corner of your house. It's debilitating that it's stopping you from achieving your true potential, your mission in life. Once again, the low self-esteem that we are seeing in our generation is chronic. That means it's big and it's debilitating. It's stopping people from fulfilling their life mission. It's also one of the main, if not the main reasons for the high drug rate we are seeing in our society today. There is a famous psychiatrist and rabbi. He is my guru, and he's written 60, 70 books on drug taking. He actually had a rehab. His name is Rabbi Abraham Dr. Twersky. And he's written 50, 60, at this point, probably 70, 80 books. All of his books cover the range, the gamut of psychology and Torah thought. He's got books on prayer, on addictive behavior. He had a drug rehab called Gateways in Pennsylvania. And he says all of my books are on one topic, coming in different forms. And I've heard him say it to me live as well. All of drug taking, all the challenges we're seeing today in dating, relationships, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, whatever it is low self-esteem. People do not see themselves as special creatures of God. If you were to eliminate that, you would pretty much get rid of the entire drug crisis here in America. I know Those of us who are old enough, remember in the 1980s, they had an anti-drug campaign. And the campaign was, just say no to drugs. Remember that? Just say no. Like myself, a licensed counselor in drug rehabilitation. It's known in the drug rehabilitation field. This campaign was the biggest flop. They spent millions and millions of dollars to tell kids, just say no. The problem with the campaign was, you turn around to a 13, 14, 15, 18-year-old and say, just say no to drugs. And what would this kid say? Why? Why should I say no? Give me a reason why I should say no. Just saying no is not enough. What is it about me that is worthy not to take drugs? What can I do in this world? How can I fulfill my mission just by saying no? Give me an answer, give me a reason. They changed it more recently to parents, the anti-drug. They realized that kids don't have the ability to know why they shouldn't. Parents should speak to their kids and tell them, you're good, this is what you need to know, and you could do better than taking drugs and ruining your life, or whatever you need to do as a parent. That's a whole different discussion. And so, number one is, low self-esteem is a problem. It's a chronic and debilitating disease, and the causes, I believe, of most ills in society today. So, one second. If you're telling me I'm meant to have good self-esteem, doesn't that run contradictory to be a humble person? Because a humble person, according to dictionary.com and the English Oxford Dictionary, is a feeling of unworthiness. Therefore, the two are diametrically opposite. What I want to tell you is that from the Torah and Jewish sources, they are not opposite. They work perfectly hand in hand. How? How can that be? Let's try to figure this out. Let's define our terms. So if humility is not having low self-esteem, what is it? What is humility? Humility is, let's define it, and then we'll take some stories and ideas to flesh this out. Humility is, I am great. I'm amazing. I'm the best doctor, the best lawyer. I am just so good. Isn't that arrogance? Isn't arrogance also the opposite of self-esteem? And the answer is it's not arrogance. Because you understand with humility that the amazing person that I was born as, or the skills and abilities that I've built up over the years I've been in this world are gifts from God. Gifts. I am fortunate. I have been blessed with a wonderful family. Or maybe if you haven't, with great teachers, or with great mazal, great fortunate luck that has led you to this place. We don't believe in luck. We all believe it's from God. However, the circumstances that I found myself in were perfect for me to fulfill my mission in this world. And so, what we're trying to say is, humility is, I am amazing. Because God gave me the ability to be born with amazing skills, whether they were natural or to build these skills. They were nurtured from the world around me. I am the best doctor. I'm the best teacher. I am amazing. And that's not arrogance, because there's room for improvement. All the skills that I have are gifts from God. What an amazing sign of humility. That I realize that I'm good. I realize that I'm amazing. But the reason I am that way is a little bit of nature and nurture. And I'm blessed. I am blessed with the abilities that I have. You know, there's a famous Novardok yeshiva in Europe in the last century. And that yeshiva was very famous for people working on their midot, on their character traits, which of course is the theme of these Wednesday afternoon sessions that we're having together. And they used to have a custom. The boys would sit down once a week, or maybe more often, and they would think to themselves or say to themselves, I am nothing. I am nothing. I am nothing. And the story goes, the boys would say this week after week, month after month. Eventually a young boy came in. He was brand new in the yeshiva, and he looked around and he saw the people saying, I am nothing. I am nothing. And he sat down with them and he started saying it too. I am nothing. I am nothing. And the boy sitting next to him turned around and said, wow, look at this guy. new here at the yeshiva, and he thinks he's nothing. Pfft, what does he know about being nothing? We've been doing this for years. Doesn't make sense. Right? Doesn't work that way. It's got to be a true, inner, reflective voice that says, I am great, but there's room for improvement. And if I am great, if I'm a great parent or great doctor, I make mistakes, but I am good at what I do. It's a God-given gift, and I'm very grateful for it. So you can have good self-esteem and at the same time, be humble. Where do we see this? Where do we see this perfect coming together, this perfect storm of great self-esteem and humility? Well, interestingly, there is one Jew in history that is lifted up among all other people as being the humblest person in Jewish history. And that is none other than less the greatest prophet that ever lived, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu is described one way in the Bible, in the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu is not called the smartest person. He is not called the greatest leader in Jewish history. He's not called the most dynamic speaker. We know he wasn't. He had a lisp. He had a speech impediment. Moses is described one way in the Bible, in the Torah, and only one way. And that way is the humblest person who ever stepped foot on earth. Now, that may sound like an exaggeration. How can the Torah write down that Moses is the humblest person that ever stepped foot on earth? To make it the question even better, how can Moses, who wrote the words from God, but wrote God's words in the Torah and say, I am the humblest person? How can you write those words? By definition, that is arrogance. Arrogance is the opposite of humility. That needs to be understood. And it works together deliciously, perfectly. Listen to how this works, and look how we can try very hard to apply this concept, these ideas, into our lives. Moses was able to be the humblest person on the earth because he was. And he understood that every talent and every capability he had was a gift from God. And therefore, he had to tell the truth. He had to say, I am the humblest person, because he was. That's the truth. And he realized that any ability that he had, including being the greatest prophet that ever stepped foot on the earth, was a gift from God. And therefore, he could be the humblest person and yet have amazing self-esteem at the same time. The rabbis use a metaphor to describe this, just to make this a little bit clearer, if I've not been clear enough. If you want, it goes like this. Every one of us is like a pot. A pot, right? A vessel. And we have walls, and we have the ability to fill that pot with all good and amazing things. If you will, the walls of the pot are ourself. That's who we are, right? We are the walls. The person who's got thick walls, who's arrogant, who's full of themselves, has less room inside the pot to fill themselves up. Moshe Rabbeinu was like a pot. He was a vessel open to learning and to understanding and to becoming a great person. The walls of his pot were very, very, very thin. He was extremely humble. He wasn't full of himself. Because of that, he was able to have a large cavity inside of himself to fill himself up with knowledge and wisdom, because he wasn't in the way of himself. In other words, if a person feels they know everything, right, and they don't have humility, you know those people? We all have friends like that. We all have friends who like they know every answer to every question. You don't need Google. I will tell you everything. Those arrogant people are the opposite of humility, because the walls of the pot are so thick that there's no room for any wisdom or anything to put inside. They know the answer to every question immediately. They are arrogant, therefore they're lacking humility. A humble person is able to say, I'm good, but there's room for improvement. and I am a great doctor, but I can always learn more. What is the secret to the Moshe Rabbeinu, the Moses people that we all want to become? Having great humility and yet having amazing good self-esteem and saying that I am Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu had to write down, I am the greatest prophet that ever lived. And yet at the same time, he's the humblest person. And the two are not contradictions. Because the truth is, he was the greatest prophet that ever lived. And he was amazing. And we could be great doctors, teachers, lawyers, parents, businessmen, businesswomen. It makes no difference. We can say, I have this ability, but I'm humble. Why? Because the abilities that I have are God-given, and there's always room for improvement. How do you show? How do you demonstrate that there's room for improvement? What is this secret golden ingredient, this secret value that we need to have that will make us great self-esteem beings and at the same time mean that we have good, healthy self-esteem? Because we must have both. And the answer to this, and this is the missing link that will tie the circle and make this all so clear, it goes like this. The ability of a person to ask questions. You see, when you ask questions, what you're saying is, I am a person who is open to learning more. I'm an amazing doctor. I'm an amazing surgeon. Whatever it is, makes no difference. It's all one thing. Great car mechanic. But there's room for growth. There's room for improvement. How? Because I still have what to learn, and therefore I still want to and I need to ask questions. I don't know everything. I need to learn and I need to grow to become a better person. We see this very clearly at the Pesach Seder. We know that we have 4 children who we invite to the Pesach Seder. We have the wise son. We have the Rasha, the bad son. We have the simple son and the one who doesn't have any questions whatsoever. Who's the best of the 4? The best of the 4 is the wise son. What makes that child wise? You would have thought he has all the answers. And yet if you look at that child, by the way, it's talking to all of us because we are all children in the end, right? We're all big babies. We're also all children of God. That wise son shows his wisdom in one way. He asks a question. Now the question in his circumstance, the Pesach Seder is, what is matzah? What is maror? Basically, why am I Jewish? That's fine. That's his question at that moment. But for us, the secret to wisdom is asking questions. When you ask questions, what are you saying? I know a lot, but I need to know more. I want to learn more. That's who I am in essence. That's a person, doesn't mean I don't know a lot already. I have good self-esteem. I know a lot. I got my degrees. I got my successful business. But there's room for improvement. How do you show there's room for improvement? You ask questions. Not skeptical questions. No, not cynical questions. Skeptical is good, I always say. Cynical is not good. I ask because I want to know more. That is the sign. That is the sweet spot, right? That middle part of the Venn diagram of good self-esteem and humility. You'll see very successful, great people will say all the time, right? Let's use the famous ones who get a lot of publicity, right? Not Steve Jobs anymore, but the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks. They always say, I read a vast amount. I try to get through a book a week. They always seem to say this. You're like, what are you reading books for? You're Steve Jobs. You know it all already. What can you learn? You should be teaching. And the answer is, the reason he's able to remain, the reason he became Steve Jobs, the reason he became Bill Gates, right? Whatever it is, because they were willing to learn and read and grow. They're always, as the expression goes, sharpening their sword. That is a sign of humility. I know a lot. I'm a multi-billionaire, and at the same time, you know what? There's room for improvement. I've got what to learn. I'll give you a cute story just to put it into perspective. A little bit of an old story, but I hope you appreciate it. The story is told of a very wealthy and successful businessman who wanted to find a shidduch, a marriage partner for his daughter. Obviously, he was very famous and very rich, and he wanted to find the right guy. So he wanted, as a parent, which by the way, parents should do. Now, unfortunately, in many cases, parents have left this realm. They should not. They should be involved in helping their children find a marriage partner. And so he wanted to find a boy that was suitable for his young daughter. So what did he do? He did something fascinating. He devised a question. He devised a really, really difficult question. Whoever knew the answer to this question could meet his daughter, date her, and if she wanted and he wanted, marry his daughter. And so this very wealthy man took this question and went traveling to the greatest learning institutions in Europe, the greatest yeshivot. And so he went from yeshiva to yeshiva, and the boy who could answer this question would be allowed to date and potentially marry his daughter. And he went from yeshiva to yeshiva. And he turned up at this first yeshiva, and he stood at the front, he banged the table and said, I have the question, the hardest question. And whoever answers this question gets to date and marry my daughter. And he announced the question. The boys would line up at the opportunity to marry into this great and prestigious family. And the first boy came up and said, I have the answer. He says, no, wrong answer. And the next boy came forward and gave the answer. No, get away. And the other boys were opening their books trying to find the answer. And here's the answer to the question. No, wrong. Next. And he burnt through all the boys in the yeshiva. He packed up his books, got on his horse, and went to the next yeshiva. And he gave out the question. And the boys lined up, and the first boy said, here's the answer. And he said, wrong. And the next boy came forward, wrong. And he went from yeshiva to yeshiva. Eventually, he went to a small yeshiva in the edge of town, the only one that was left. And he stood in front of the Beit Midrash. And he said, here is the question. Whoever answers this question, the boys lined up. And eventually there was a little boy, a small boy, a young boy at the back of yeshiva. And it was his turn. And he was so excited. And he knew that he had the answer to this question. And he was so excited. And he stood there. And the man said to him, young man, do you think you have the answer? And the boy said, yes, I have the answer to your question. And he gave him the answer to the question. And the man said, no, that's wrong. That isn't the answer to my question. And he packed up his bags with his books, and he went back onto his horse to go to the next yeshiva to find the right boy who knew the answer. And he started to ride away. And as he started to run away, he heard from behind him a voice screaming, wait, stop. And he turned around and he saw a young boy running. And there was sand coming under his feet as he ran. And the man stopped his horse and he turned around and he saw it was this last boy who was convinced he had the answer to the question. And he said, yes. He said, stop, don't leave yet. He says, do you have the answer to my question? And the young boy says, no, I couldn't figure out. But before you left, I wanted to know what the answer is. You didn't tell me the answer to the question. I know I don't get it. Doesn't mean I don't want to know it. And the man said, you can marry my daughter. That's all I wanted. No one approached me. From all these great kids, no one approached me and asked me what the answer to that question was. That's all I wanted. I wanted a sign of humility that you were able to say, I want to know. That, my friends, is the secret to good self-esteem and humility. There's room for improvement. I want to learn. You know, the Hebrew word, my friends, for wisdom is chokhmah. Chokhmah is wisdom, not knowledge. Knowledge you can pick up anywhere. Go to university, go to yeshiva, go online. Your computer is full of knowledge. But that's not what we're looking for over here, my friends. We're looking for wisdom. And the Hebrew word for wisdom is chokhmah. Knowledge is dat. Dat is knowledge. That's easy. You can pick that up, read a book, go online. But wisdom, that takes an openness and the ability to say, I don't know, I want to learn more. I want to grow in wisdom. The Hebrew word for wisdom is chokhmah. If you take the word chokhmah and you cut it in two and you spin around the first part, why you spin around we'll see, you get two new words. The word chokhmah becomes two new words. And those words are koach ma. Koach ma. What is koach ma? Koach means power. Ma means what? Where does wisdom come from? The power of what? What does that mean? The power of asking questions. As soon as you say, I don't know, but I want to know more, you have become part of the people of wisdom. The power of saying, I don't know everything, I can learn more. I'm great, I've got self-esteem, but there's room for improvement. There's room and ability for me to open more. I can open my vessel, I can thin my walls down, like Moshe Rabbeinu, and I can have great humility. And so now we have the perfect triangle. We have good self-esteem. I'm great, I'm amazing. I am God's gift. We have humility, but I don't have everything. There's room for improvement. How? By asking questions, by wanting to learn more, by being skeptical, not cynical. Cynical is not the wise son. Cynical is the Rasha. The Rasha, the evil son, child at the Pesach Seder, he also has questions, but his questions are cynical. What do you know? Why are you doing that for? That's a question, but it's cynical. Skeptical is, well, why are you doing that? Teach me, I want to learn. Just like that young boy who was looking to marry the daughter of the great man who came to the yeshiva. I want to learn. My desire to learn is greater than my own feeling of knowledge. That, my friends, is the secret to self-improvement. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was described one way and only one way in the Torah, and the only description and character trait we have of Moses is the humblest person that ever stepped foot on earth. Meaning, there was no one who was more open to learning and wisdom than Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's how he became the greatest prophet that ever lived. He wasn't the greatest prophet and therefore he was the wise. It's the other way around. How do you become a great prophet? How do you become a person who's open to divine information? By saying, I am great, but there's room for improvement. And how? By asking questions. Friends, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Next week, I'll be back in New York City. I look forward, everyone, to seeing you, God willing, next week. Have a wonderful and growth-inspired and successful week. Shalom, shalom.